When I talk about tilings, there's sometimes confusion about what exactly a tiling is for. And when we're looking at these origami tessellations, I'm specifically looking at twist-based origami tessellations that use twists with pleats that go between them and lay flat in the final shape. And you'll notice in these four or several twists that are here in front of me, the outline of the paper matches the twist shape. So the hexagon is in a hexagon, the triangle is in a triangle, the square is in a square, the rhombus is in a rhombus. And this is a visualization of the tile that each of these twists fits inside of. So what's important about these tiles is that the pleat is leaving the tile perpendicularly. And so whether the twist is folded or not, the tile still has that same boundary. This means that I can take a twist of one tile and connect it to a twist of another tile, but only if they're opposite twist handednesses. So if we have a left-handed twist of one shape and a right-handed twist of the other, now these are going to match up. But where this analogy breaks down is that in the crease patterns, in the folded forms, we don't need to have specific triangle areas and specific hexagon areas for these particular twists. We can have just the same connectivity as we had in the in the broad arrangement of shapes. So if we're looking at arrangements of shapes and we want to see the connectivity, well, we can see this arrangement of shapes is alternating hexagons and triangles. I also call it hexagons and triangles sixfold because there's 6 of the same thing around each hexagon. Another view of this is the skeleton view, where you can see, okay, each line here is a pleat and each dot is a twist. The lines are going from one twist to another, and in this case, they're going from the hexagon out to triangles. From the triangles, they're going to hexagons. And we get this kind of rhombusy shape that's the connectivity of twists in this tiling. Now, if I go to a specific crease pattern, like this open hexagon closed triangle weave, we see a open hexagon, just like I was showing earlier with the open hole on the back, connected to closed triangles all the way around. All 6 of them are closed triangles. That's true for all of these hexagons. And that's the closed triangle that I was showing earlier. And each of those triangles is connected to 3 hexagons. So if I show the skeleton of this, we see exactly that same rhombus, flowery connections that we saw in the skeleton of the tiling itself. So we can know from that we're going to be folding in a certain order, because with the skeleton of the tiling, you can say, oh, when I have one hexagon, there's no pleats that are overlapping with anything else. And then if I add this next layer, one of the things you can see on each edge, all of those edges, all of those pleats are heading out in the same direction. They're not going to cross each other. They're all parallel on each of those edges. And so we can say every time we add a layer of hexagons and triangles going around, really, I think of it as a layer of hexagons and the triangles needed to make those hexagons happy. Then we are matching this requirement that all the pleats at the edge are not going to cross each other. And we can take this a little bit further by saying that, what if we have another pattern? This is one that hasn't been folded before. It's called Portals, one of my designs. And it's what we're going to be folding together today. And we can say, okay, does it have the same connectivity? And in my crease pattern files, like if you ever get a PDF of my crease patterns, like in the Summer of Twists ebook, or any of my crease pattern bundles on gatheringfolds.com, you'll see the crease pattern, and then the next page will be the skeleton overlaying the crease pattern. So it's telling you exactly what is a twist and which twists are connected. And we see the same structure. It's not quite as regular as the standard hexagons and triangles when it's alternating exactly one hexagon and one triangle. But we still see those same connections. All 6 pleats from every hexagon go to triangles. All 3 pleats from every triangle go to hexagons. And this funky looking thing is a hybrid hexagon twist on the back side of the paper. It's one that I don't think I've taught on YouTube before. It's the diamond shaped 2-fold rotationally symmetric one. Or maybe I did like one video back in the fall. But given this structure, we can know how to fold it. And specifically, there's this file that I made for Tessellations by Tiles, and it shows like not only what twist, but what the symmetry is going to be as you build up. And one thing I do want to show is that these different ways of placing symmetry on this tiling correspond to different colorings of the tiling. So this is the standard coloring. And then you can also color with 2 different hexagon colors and all the same triangle color. You can color with 2 different hexagons and 2 different triangles. And that's the one that we'll be working on today. And so in this coloring, we have hexagon 1, hexagon 2, triangle 1, triangle 2, and these are different twists that fill these different positions when we're looking at the tiling. So another way of seeing that is looking at the each ring that we add. And so we start in the center with a position of 6-fold rotational symmetry and build out with the non-rotational triangles, by which I mean the ones that are not in a global position of rotational symmetry, and then the positions of 2-fold and 3-fold rotational symmetry, which are our second triangles and second hexagons, or vice versa, depending on what order you hear that in. And then you add another ring, and another, and another. And I've got these blue dots for the positions of 6-fold rotational symmetry, that hexagon 1 that we saw in the other diagram, and gray dots for the 2-fold positions. One of the interesting things about this arrangement of symmetry is that you'll see rings where there's only gray dots, and then rings where there's alternating blue and gray. And then a ring where there's only gray dots, and then a ring that's alternating blue and gray. And this is very convenient because it allows us to have a border where the repeats of the blue dots are like the closest repeats are in a row on the border with a pleated edge. But that's a whole other project planning discussion. For right now, I want to attach this to the side. There we go. So we can see the crease pattern also. And in this situation, that six-fold rotationally symmetric point is the closed hexagon. And then as we go out, we're going to add these 6 triangles immediately around the hexagon, these 6 hexagons that are positions of 2-fold rotational symmetry, and these 6 triangles that are positions of 3-fold rotational symmetry. So that's what we're going to be doing as we build out our tessellation, and we'll get another ring as well. I'll be using a 32-fold triangle grid on a hexagon. And let's go ahead and get started. So, going to bring up just the crease pattern without the skeleton as we start to fold. And we're going to grab our paper here and start with that central hexagon. So with a closed hexagon twist, I don't even really need to find the center of the paper first. I'm just going to find the right-hand corner, and I'm going to make sure to do this twist right-handedly. And that's something that I can see in the crease pattern, where if I have my paper aligned with the crease pattern with one grid direction aligned vertically, I can say, well, my pleat going up and to the right has a mountain and then a valley above it. So pleat going up and to the right has mountain and valley above it. And so I'm going to have the mountain come straight out to the corner of my hexagon and fold up onto the valley. And I'm going to repeat that for all 6 corners, making sure that the center of my paper stays up and accessible, that it doesn't get like trapped down in some other folds. And I also want to make sure that I'm not erasing existing pleats when I'm adding new ones. So once we've got our closed hexagon set up, we can go ahead and pop it, grab it, twist it around. The faster you twist, the less crumpling there will be. And I'll grab my boon folder to fold everything nice and flat. Next up, and this is something that I'll really just do on the first round around the center, I'm going to do just those next triangles first, and then go to these twists that are on the opposite side of the paper. Usually when I'm folding and adding a ring of hexagons around the center, I'm going to focus on the hexagon and have 2 triangle wraps or 2 triangle setups of some kind in order to accommodate that hexagon. But for the first ring around the center, we kind of break it into 2 or 3 parts where we're folding the central triangles and then the next hexagon and then the next triangles. So these triangles are closed triangle twists, and they're at tube pleat spacing. So there's 2 spaces between these valleys. So I can say, well, my valley is going to be 2 spaces away from the neighboring valley, or 1 space away from the folded mountain. And then my mountain is going to be 1 space further than that. And I'll bring this over so it's on my right-hand side and split the existing mountain fold into a 3-way intersection at my target grid point where that mountain fold hits the existing mountain, making sure to erase the extension of the pleat to the edge of the paper, and I'll squash that triangle twist. Now I'm going to go around clockwise for this one because the next twist, the hexagon here, is on the opposite side of the paper, and so it's going to be a nicer pleat overlap for opening on that side if I go around clockwise. So I'm going to take the bottom of the tube and put in my next closed triangle, also at tube pleat spacing relative to the next pleat, and work my way around. All the way around my closed hexagon twist. And I should mention, this is an advanced piece, so I'm moving a little bit faster because I do expect you to know how to identify tube pleat spacing and how to repeat this closed triangle twist on all of the pleats from the hexagon. Now, this last triangle around the hexagon had pleat overlaps in 2 different directions. One of them is the exact same overlap that we've been doing, and the other one is the same pleats but overlapped in the opposite order. So in order to make them all the same, I'm going to open the pleat overlap, and this is the triangle that I folded last. I'm going to make that pleat go through fully first, have that pleat close up, and then close the pleat from my first triangle after. So now it should look identical to all of these other pleat overlaps, and now I don't have to care how I flip the paper over. So that move is called reordering the pleat overlaps, or the pleat overlap singular, or reordering the pleats. And now we can flip the paper over. Now, it's important to notice on my crease pattern how these pleats are interacting with this hybrid hexagon twist. And the way these pleats are coming in, both of these 2 pleats are acting quote unquote closed as opposed to open. So if they're both acting closed, that means that since the very center, the center diamond is valleys, we're going to be looking at the valleys to see what's the center. This valley fold is headed straight into the center. This valley fold is headed straight into the center. And then the other valley fold, so on the opposite side we see the same things. The third direction has its valley fold coming 1 spacing away from the center, like you would do for an open hexagon twist. So I'm going to pick an intersection, just the one closest to me on my right hand side, and say, okay, opening things up, these two pleats are coming in to a central point. Now notice on this side, it's the mountains that are coming into the center. So I've got my mountains coming into the center because I flipped the paper over. What looks like valleys on the crease pattern are now mountains in front of me on the paper. And for my third grid direction, so right now, and I'm just going to start sketching this. I've got this mountain coming into the center, this mountain coming into the center. My third grid direction is going to be the verticals, and those are going to come one spacing away from the center. And so, actually I drew that slightly incorrectly. It's not going to be those spaces away from the center. I needed to remember that this is a right-handed twist. It's going to be this one down here and that one up here. Now you might be curious what tipped me off. Well, it was the fact that in the crease pattern, everything is at tube pleat spacing. Every single gap between parallel pleats is 2 spaces. And when I was putting in that pleat in the wrong place, in the wrong orientation, I saw it was going to be causing a single depth fold pleat. So now I can find my new pleats for those verticals, and notice up here it looks like I have a single wide pleat, but that's after the overlap. Before the overlap, I have 2 spacings. And for my final 2 directions, I'm going to be taking those straight out from the center, just like the ones on the opposite side. And making sure that all of my valleys are actually on grid lines. I have this diamond, and I can use my bone folder to smooth out the bits underneath. And on these corners, I'm going to pull this segment as far this way as I can. So I want it buckling with the pleat instead of against the pleat, as a matter of personal aesthetics, but it's hidden so no one can really tell. And now it's time to move on to the next of these twists. So essentially, we're going to have 6 of these hybrid hexagons around our center, and we're also going to have these other triangle twists, and these are open triangle twists on the same side as our hybrid hexagon twists. So as I come over here, I can say, well, I'm going to have tube pleats everywhere, so I may as well go ahead and mark that valley, and therefore the next mountain. And I can either set up the open triangle right away, or I can set that up as a 3-way intersection and lay it down for later. And with this intersection, I need to remember that the 2 pleats coming from the closed triangles on the other side are marking the center. So then I can identify where the center is, and given that I have 3 pleats, everything is going to like I have 3 pleats and I know where the center is, and I know that everything is the same on opposite sides of the center, then I can get the rest of my pleats. And squash this twist. And I may as well at this point go ahead and turn this 3-way intersection into an open triangle twist and squash that as well. Once again, making sure, because it's not necessarily guaranteed, that all of your valley folds are actually on grid lines. And then I'm going to shift us to a different view here so I can actually see if y'all have questions while we're folding the next bit. Yeah, so for this hybrid hexagon twist, the bone folder is really convenient because there's those bits sticking out underneath that are not very amenable to folding directly by hand. I mean, at this scale, I could do it, but for most of my pieces where my grid divisions are twice as small, I'm not going to be able to stick my fingers under here in order to get these things flat. And so it can be super helpful to have a bone folder. And as I'm working my way around, I'm doing exactly the same steps that I did for the second hybrid hexagon. I'm finding that tube pleat spacing relative to the next twist over, setting up my triangle as a 3-way intersection, opening up my pleat overlap, identifying which point is the center, and then placing my 3 remaining pleats so that they match what's going on the opposite side of the twist. And this is something that I do really quickly, and that's just because I've practiced this twist before. So if you haven't practiced this 2-fold diamond hybrid hexagon twist, you might want to do a small demo piece with it. So let's say you know how to do the open hexagon, then you can take certain edges, and it's going to be 2 edges in a row, and then skip 1, and then do 2 more edges, or you shift the pleat of the open hexagon back to as if it were a closed hexagon. And this will use all the same folds, so I didn't add any new folds as the open hexagon. So I'm working my way around, setting up my new hybrid hexagon twists. And once again, we're finding the center from the two mountain folds coming from closed triangles on the other side. And then that is defining where our other two pleats on the opposite side need to be, and then the two pleats that are acting open are one space out from those, from the center rather. And then the bone folder is really helpful as you gather everything together to squash. And then the open triangle also showing up in there. Rotating around, this time we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our diamond hybrid hexagon twists. So when I go to put in the last one, I have an extra pleat that's hanging out. I'm gonna get rid of this top pleat by putting in a three-way intersection for our triangle. And this bottom pleat, when I run my other vertical down, I can also get that out of the way as a three-way intersection. And then finish getting our new hexagon in place. And squash that. And fold our two open triangles, one on either side of this sixth hexagon. So if we look back at that tiling diagram, what we just did is these 6 hexagons and 12 triangles around our central hexagon. In our next ring around the center, we're going to be having our 6-fold hexagons alternating with 2-fold hexagons, and none of the triangles will be the 3-fold triangles. They're all going to be those closed triangles right next to the closed hexagon. So that's a useful bit of information that's contained in this diagram. Coming back to the folding, we can go ahead and do this directly without looking at the crease pattern by saying, okay, I need to put, so first I have a set of parallel pleats. And on this set of parallel pleats, this one is coming from a hexagon, this one is coming from a triangle, this one is coming from a hexagon. So I'm going to need to put the opposite twists on them. Triangle, hexagon, triangle. And in this situation, I know that the hexagons coming from the triangle that's a position of 3-fold rotational symmetry are these hybrid hexagons. And I know that they happen at tube pleat spacing from this triangle. And I know from looking at the diagram earlier that the only triangles I'm going to add are the closed triangles on the closed hexagon side. So I can take all that information and say, well, this valley is going to pop down to form a triangle wrap. So the valley is going to go one spacing after it hits the mountain, where it hits the next valley that's sitting under the mountain, and it's going to split and form a 3-way intersection of valleys. And we're going to make that lay down flat for now. And another thing that we can say is that the pleat from the hybrid hexagon going to the open triangle is the open pleat of the hybrid hexagon. So this one is going to be the open pleat of the hybrid hexagon, which means that that actually is the center point of my twist, because the center point has to be one spacing away from this mountain fold and on this mountain fold. So there's my center point. That means I can identify the remaining pleats of the pattern, because my third direction is also going to go straight through the center point. So as I pass this third direction, so I have the one going right out to the edge and the one coming in and hitting the next pleat, that is going to need a triangle wrap as well. Then the mountain going through the center is going to go out the other side on the center also. And we're able to set up this hybrid hexagon twist and squash. So that valley fold didn't go quite as far as I thought it would. And we can double check that we got it right, because the pointy tip of each of these diamonds is directly connected to the corner of the triangle, and the fat corner is close in to the triangle. So we're able to see all of these things that are showing up. And Chris, for your question about practicing on a 16-fold grid, you're not going to get the whole hybrid hexagon twist on 16-fold, but you probably would on 24. So now we've got this hybrid hexagon, and or I should clarify, it's not, a 16-fold is not big enough to start with this center and then get this ring. But 16-fold is definitely big enough to practice a single twist on its own. Even 8-fold would be big enough for the single twist. So now we've got these two triangle wraps that I'm going to flip over and squash into closed triangles. And I need to decide from here, like, am I working around this way or this way? And it doesn't look like it's going to make a huge difference either way, but I'm going to go clockwise, just from some intuition about, like, as we look at these pleats going out, this one stops here and this one stops over here. So if I work around this way, I'm working kind of around and in, which tends to be nicer. So I've got my new set of parallel pleats. I know that I'm going to have a closed hexagon off of this triangle, just like off of this triangle over here. And so I can go ahead and set up and say, like, okay, here's my tube pleat going up above. So tube pleat going up above. At this stage, since I'm so close to the edge of the paper, I may as well squash that partial hexagon twist. And these are coming in and creating a closed hexagon. So we're looking for where those mountains come to a single point. And that next triangle is going to be on the same side. So I'm popping that pleat up to set up the three-way intersection for the triangle while I squash this hexagon, which goes really nicely because we're right on the edge of the paper. Now this triangle, if I go to just squash it directly, I can do that, but I would prefer to free up this pleat and not kind of bind it in place. So what I'm going to do is open things up and let my pleat kind of zigzag and cascade over the existing pleat. This is a compound wrap. And it means I have a lot less layers and it's going to be a lot easier to open on the back side. And squash the triangle. Now I've got my hybrid hexagon to fold. So I'm going to flip over. Notice I held on to that little arrangement of pleats, which I'm going to open up. And once again, the pleat coming from the open triangle is the open pleat. And this time the center is going to be in on this side, not this side, because we need the center to be further away from the valleys. And so I can say, this is the open pleat, this is the mountain of a closed pleat, there's my center. I can also run a tube pleat up here. So I've got my folded mountain, my valley will be one spacing away, my mountain will be one spacing further than that. And I know that all of my triangles this time will be closed on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that triangle. And this is providing extra confirmation that that is indeed my center point. And I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of my pleats in place and finish setting up this two-fold hybrid hexagon twist. And squash all the way down. Now for this hybrid hexagon, you'll notice I only put in one triangle. But in these loops around, if you have enough grid, you'll always need two triangles for each new hexagon. The one that I was missing here is from an intersection of a pleat going this way from that closed hexagon and this pleat from the hybrid hexagon. So now I've got that triangle wrap. I'm going to flip over and squash. And if I wanted to be super complete about this, I could squash the partial triangle that I've got here on the edge, which I know needs to be there because we have the corners of the triangles touching around our closed hexagons. Now we're going to be repeating steps. So I'm going to have another very partial closed hexagon in here. It's going to have a tube pleat up here. We get our partial triangle there. And we find where those two mountain folds intersect. That's the center of our closed hexagon. Our next triangle is going to be on the same side, so we don't want to just wrap that pleat. We squash the closed hexagon, and then as we go to squash the triangle, we're going to free the layers and put in a compound wrap. And if I was going to Like if I had a lot more grid, one of the things I could do to make it a little bit easier on myself for the hybrid hexagon is say, well, I know already where the next triangle goes. I'm going to open up this area and put in the pleat. And at this point, I would do the triangle wrap, or sorry, the triangle as a three-way intersection, because I would have another mountain from this hexagon. And I have that already opened and halfway set up. I have 3 pleats going into this hybrid hexagon by the time I flip it over. And now I need to remember that the pleat coming from the open triangle is my open type pleat, and the other 2 are defining where the center is. And then I can go and put in my remaining pleats. And squash my hybrid hexagon. And you can see how this process starts becoming rather fast once you've identified the sequence of steps that you need to do in each ring around the center. So here I'm putting in my next closed hexagon. The triangle, both of the triangles around it will be on this same side. I'm going to put in the compound wrap so everything can lay down flat as I squash the second triangle. And then I can go ahead and set up this triangle above. I can even set up the next triangle down below as well. So again, tube plate spacing, because everything in this pattern is tube plate spacing. And now when I flip over, I've already got the vast majority of what I need for this hybrid hexagon. I've already got that triangle wrap. I just needed these 2 more pleats. And so the name of the game with these hexagons and triangles, 6-fold tiling patterns is what 2 triangles do I need for each new hexagon? And if you've got that, then you can add in whatever hexagon you need to. So working my way around. We're not going to have enough grid for another repeat, but it's worth noting that if I were to do another ring around the center, it would be we would have our hybrid hexagon twists as the only hexagons that would be in that ring. And it would kind of close off all of the open spaces. So the next ring around the center would be a really nice stopping point for a larger scale piece. And so we're working our way around, coming to our last direction of parallel pleats. And for this one, we're going to have not just the 2 hexagons that we've been seeing, but we're going to pick up that closed hexagon that we didn't do on our first set of parallel pleats. So the first set of parallel pleats, we only did 1 hexagon twist. So our last set of parallel pleats, we're going to do 3. And that's going to mean that, well, if we had more grid, I would have a pleat overlap over here where we didn't see one before. And there's one last thing that I want to show you after we finish folding, which is that you can see the skeleton of the tiling in the folded form too. So now I've got all of my hexagons, all of my partial triangles. There's nothing else that can be added on this piece of paper that's part of the pattern. And here we have the finished piece. Again, I call this pattern Portals, P-O-R-T-A-L-S. And I had to name it without seeing it. This is the first time I've ever folded it. But for me, it's got these swirly bits in the center, surrounded by these structures. So that's why I named it Portals. And then on this side, it looks kind of floral, with kind of this flower interacting with the next flower and the next and the next and the next. So that's what's going on with this tessellation. There's always new ways to continue folding from a particular starting point. And I'll show you that last thing that I wanted to show in just a moment, which is, here we go. So when you have the folded form of a piece, you can place a dot on, and like with the dots on this one, it kind of looks like it's just a grid, but it's really the closed hexagons and closed triangles alternating on the same side of the paper, the closed triaxial weave that Fujimoto found. And we can see those same positions. So a slightly clearer example is if we have these closed triangle twists and each one has a pleat going to its nearest neighbor, we see this hexagon lattice showing up. And we can also see that the pleats going out to the edge are matching the lines going out from the twists. In this particular tessellation, I'm using a cluster of things in the place of a single triangle, but there's only 6 pleats leaving the cluster, and those go to triangles. So I could use a giant hexagon instead of the cluster, which is what's going on here on the outside. And if we bring rhombi into the mix, we have the hexagon going to triangles, going to rhombi. And we can see there's a pleat going out in that direction that the line is pointing off of every single one of, so that bit is this pleat, that bit is the pleat that would be going off the tip of that rhombus. We can see that these pleats are matching the skeleton of the tessellation. Even when we use some funky arrangements of things, we've got these 6 triangles alternating front and back in the center, and then these larger triangles around them, again alternating front and back. And once again, there's a pleat leaving each of these twists parallel to each other in the border. Not necessarily along the same direction as the line from the skeleton, but if these lines are parallel, then these folds are also parallel. And with square tilings, likewise, you can overlay, like each square has 4 square connections. That creates this square lattice of twists. And that is true for any square tiling tessellation. With this 8 and 4 right triangles pattern, we have our 8 right triangles and our 4 right triangles. And we're able to continue that pattern as far as we like. So that's what's going on with all of these tilings. This is how I'm thinking about the tessellations. And you're really able to increase your ability to fold one twist at a time when you're thinking about adding layers to a tiling. So I'm seeing a question of, is it possible to see it by transparency? If you're talking about this folded pattern, I can certainly show the backlighting. But the skeleton of the tessellation is not really something that you see in the folded form. In my crease patterns, I have it as an added layer, but it's not something that most people will show. So we've got a lovely little spiral here in the center of our portal. So so yes, the right triangles are the topic for the month of June in Tessellation Academy. I'll be seeing or I'll be showing 2 different tilings, 2 different structures of arranging the right triangles. One of them is just like the equilateral triangles with loops of 6 everywhere, like we saw in the skeleton images that we just looked at. And then another is the 8 and 4 right triangles. And so seeing the connectivity and then the different ways of applying the connectivity can really change like the possibilities that you see for tessellation designs, not just for folding. So that's going to be all for today. Happy folding, everyone. And this will also be my last live stream for a while. Next week, I'm going to be putting the welcome video for Summer of Twists up here on YouTube. And I'm taking a break from live streams for the summer during Summer of Twists. So I'll make sure to add a link for Summer of Twists down below. And if you want to join me for those, those twists tutorials are going to be released Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from June 3rd to August 9th. So happy folding, everyone, and I'll see you in summer.